Welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the Sega Saturn's crown jewels, Shining Force 3. Released in 1997, this tactical RPG was the last main entry in the Shining Force series before it ventured into new genres. Shining Force 3 is a massive and complex game that not only sticks to its roots, but also pushes the boundaries of what strategy games could achieve in the 90s. It's not just the sharp tactical gameplay. It's the blend of epic storytelling, strategic depth, and its leap into 3D environments that felt revolutionary for its time. Sega pushed the boundaries of what its hardware could do, offering a tactical RPG experience that looked and felt ahead of most games in the genre back then. But what really sets this game apart is its dedication to complex narrative design. The story follows the adventures of Symbiose, Median, and Julian, each of whom has their own scenario in the game, with multiple perspectives weaving together. It's like a tactical RPG told in 3 epic acts, something almost unheard of in the 90s, especially for Western audiences who didn't get the full trilogy. Shining Force 3 is one of those hidden gems that deserves a closer look. If you've been waiting for a reason to dig into your Sega Saturn collection, consider this your call to action. Shining Force 3 doesn't just give you a simple good versus evil narrative. No, this game delivers a deep, interconnected tale told from multiple perspectives, creating one of the most ambitious RPG stories of its time. The game is split into 3 scenarios, each focusing on a different protagonist: Symbiose, Median, and Julian. These 3 heroes hail from different factions within a world teetering on the edge of war. The beauty of Shining Force 3's story lies in how these scenarios interweave, offering different viewpoints on the same overarching conflict. The game kicks off with Scenario 1, where you step into the shoes of Symbiose, a young noble from the Republic of Espinia. Tensions between the Republic and the Empire of Dystonia are rising, and as Symbiose, you quickly find yourself thrust into the center of a war that's about more than just politics. What begins as a simple mission to defend your homeland soon spirals into a tale of ancient prophecies, hidden truths, and shadowy powers manipulating events from behind the scenes. As Symbiose leads his force, he begins to uncover a plot that involves an ancient sect known as the Bullsome sect, who seeks to reignite an age-old conflict to take control of the continent. But that's only the beginning. Scenario 2 shifts the perspective to Median, a prince of the Empire and the son of the Emperor himself. Median's story runs parallel to Symbiose, but this time you see the conflict from the other side. While the Empire is painted as the antagonist in Symbiose's story, Median's scenario shows the moral complexity of the war. You'll begin to question who the real villains are as you follow Median's struggle to navigate the politics of the Empire while also resisting the same sinister forces influencing the Republic. Median is caught between loyalty to his family and his personal sense of justice, making his story as emotionally charged as it is action-packed. Finally, in Scenario 3, we see the world through the eyes of Julian, a wandering swordsman with his own personal vendetta. Julian's journey ties everything together as he seeks revenge against the Bullsome sect for his father's death. This scenario is where the full scope of the conflict comes to light, revealing the true machinations of the sect and the ancient evils that threaten both the Republic and the Empire. Julian's story serves as the climax of the entire saga, as all the events of the previous 2 scenarios come together for an epic final confrontation. One of the most impressive things about Shining Force 3's narrative is how these 3 scenarios interact. Decisions made in one scenario can affect events in another, making it feel like you're playing through a living, breathing world where your actions have real consequences. It was a level of storytelling sophistication rarely seen in RPGs of the era, let alone in tactical RPGs. The narrative depth of Shining Force 3 makes it a must-play for fans of RPG storytelling. It was a game that didn't just tell a story, it made you live through it, making every battle, every decision, and every plot twist feel personal. Unfortunately, outside of Japan, only the first scenario was officially released, which means many Western players never got to experience the full trilogy. For those who did, it was a revelation of story that felt like a blend of classic high fantasy and political intrigue, with a sense of scope and ambition that would influence the genre for years to come. When it comes to gameplay, Shining Force 3 took the traditional tactical RPG formula that fans loved from earlier titles and refined it for the Sega Saturn era. If you've played the earlier Shining Force games on the Sega Genesis, you'll feel right at home here, but with a slew of enhancements that make the experience richer and more dynamic. At its core, Shining Force 3 is a turn-based strategy game where you control a team of diverse characters across grid-based battlefields. Each battle feels like a puzzle where unit placement, enemy types, and terrain advantages all play critical roles. The game doesn't just throw enemies at you, it challenges you to think tactically about every move you make. The strategy is more than just brute force. You'll need to consider positioning, support, and special abilities to succeed. In typical Shining Force fashion, you start with a small force of characters, each representing a different class, from swordsmen and knights to archers and mages. As your characters engage in combat, they earn experience points and level up, making them stronger and unlocking new abilities. What stands out in Shining Force is how it evolves these familiar mechanics with more complex battlefield scenarios in 3D environments. Gone are the flat 2D maps of the past. Now, terrain and elevation affect your strategy. Attacking from higher ground, for instance, grants bonuses, adding a new layer of depth to combat. The weapon system in Shining Force 3 also gets a significant upgrade. Characters can equip different types of weapons, and each weapon type has its own experience level. The more a character uses a specific weapon, the more proficient they become with it, unlocking special attacks that can turn the tide of battle. Mastering the right weapon for each character becomes essential, especially when facing tougher enemies and bosses. Promotions return as well, allowing characters to advance to new, more powerful classes once they hit a certain level. This not only boosts their stats, but also changes their appearance and abilities. Promotions add a satisfying sense of progression, making each battle feel like a step toward building an unstoppable force. However, knowing when to promote is crucial. Promote too early, and you might miss out on valuable stat gains. Promote too late, and you could be facing stronger enemies without the advantages of a more powerful class. As I mentioned earlier, the most unique aspect of Shining Force 3's gameplay is how the three scenarios connect. Characters you meet in one scenario can be recruited or have an impact on later scenarios. For example, in Scenario 1, Symbios might recruit a character who later shows up in Julian's scenario to offer help or further the story. Decisions you make in one scenario carry over to the others, which was groundbreaking for the time and adds a huge amount of replay value. You'll want to see how your choices affect future events, making every playthrough feel slightly different. When it comes to Shining Force 3, the graphics and sound play a huge role in delivering an immersive experience that was a big leap forward for the series. For a game released in the late 90s on the Sega Saturn, a system known for its quirky 3D capabilities, Shining Force 3 did an incredible job pushing the hardware to its limits. While it may look a little dated today, back then it was nothing short of impressive, and it still holds a special place in the hearts of retro gamers who appreciate its charm. While previous Shining Force titles were known for their beautiful 2D sprite work, Shining Force 3 made the bold leap to 3D. This was a significant change for the series, and at the time, it felt like a fresh take on the tactical RPG genre. The 3D environments allowed for more dynamic and varied battlefields. The game's grid-based battlefields are fully rendered in 3D, with polygonal characters moving around the map. Sure, by today's standards, those blocky character models might seem primitive, but in 1997, they were cutting edge for a strategy RPG. Each character has a unique look that captures their personality, from the noble Symbios to the stoic Julian and the regal Median. The animations, especially during combat, bring a cinematic flair that was rare at the time. But what really stands out in Shining Force 3's visual design is the attention to detail in the environments. Each battlefield has its own unique aesthetic, from lush forests and snowy mountain ranges to dark caves and imposing fortresses. The variety of locations keeps the game visually interesting, even after hours of tactical combat. Now, let's talk about the sound design, which is just as important in creating the game's epic atmosphere. The Shining Force series has always been known for its excellent music, and Shining Force 3 is no exception. The game's soundtrack, composed by Motoe Sakuraba and Masahiko Yoshimura, is a powerful mix of orchestral and synth elements that perfectly captures the high-stakes drama of the game's story. From the moment you start the game, you're greeted with an epic, heroic overture that sets the tone for the entire experience. Each scenario has its own distinct musical themes, adding depth to the unique perspectives of Synbios, Median, and Julian. The battle music ramps up the tension with fast-paced tracks that push you to think on your feet as you make tactical decisions. But Shining Force 3 isn't all about high-energy tunes. There are plenty of quieter, more emotional tracks that underscore the game's more introspective moments, whether it's a heartfelt conversation between characters or a somber moment of loss. What's impressive about the music is how well it blends with the gameplay. It never feels out of place or overbearing. Instead, it heightens the emotion of each scene, whether you're locked in a tense battle or exploring the world between missions. The boss battle themes, in particular, are standout tracks, giving each major encounter a sense of grandeur and urgency. One of the more underrated aspects of Shining Force 3 is its voice acting. While not every line in the game is fully voiced, the key moments are, and they're delivered with a level of quality that was rare for the time. Important dialogue during cutscenes or battle cries in combat are fully voiced, adding a layer of drama that further pulls you into the story. It's not on the level of modern voice-acted RPGs, but for the late 90s it was a nice touch that made those big story moments hit harder. Shining Force 3 stands out as one of the better-looking and sounding games on the Sega Saturn. Whether it's the detailed character animations, the beautifully composed soundtrack, or the satisfying sound effects, the game's presentation works hand-in-hand with its gameplay to create a memorable experience that still resonates with players today. Shining Force 3 may not have achieved mainstream success, largely due to its limited release on the Sega Saturn, but its impact on the tactical RPG genre and its lasting influence on fans cannot be understated. For many, it stands as a beloved classic, a hidden gem from an era when Sega was struggling to keep up in the console wars, yet still managed to produce some of the most memorable games of the 1990s. The Saturn was never able to compete with the PlayStation or Nintendo 64 in terms of sales or popularity. Sega's mishandling of the system's launch and marketing certainly didn't help, and by the time Shining Force I was released in 1997, the Saturn was already on its way out, with Sega shifting focus to the upcoming Dreamcast. This made Shining Force 3 one of the last major titles for the system, a bittersweet farewell to the console for many fans. The decision to release only the first scenario in the West hurt the game's legacy in English-speaking regions. Scenario 1 told a gripping story from Synbios' perspective, but it left players hanging without the full resolution. Those who played through the Japanese versions of Scenarios 2 and 3 know how brilliantly the stories of Median and Julian tied everything together. The lack of official localization for the complete trilogy has made Shining Force somewhat of a cult classic, with dedicated fans going as far as creating unofficial fan translations to fill the gap Sega left. Thanks to these fan efforts, Western players have been able to experience the full trilogy, even though it was never officially released outside Japan. These fan translations have kept the game alive in the retro gaming community, and they stand as a testament to how deeply Shining Force I resonated with its audience. It's rare to see a fanbase so passionate that they'll go to such lengths to preserve a game's full experience, but Shining Force 3 is one of those rare cases. There's a sense of nostalgia surrounding Shining Force 3 that elevates it beyond a typical retro game. Its rarity in the West, combined with the mystery surrounding the two missing scenarios, gives it a legendary status among Sega fans. People who never even owned a Saturn have heard of Shining Force 3 either through retro gaming circles or YouTube channels that celebrate the golden age of gaming. Its unique place in gaming history, as part of the final wave of Sega Saturn titles, has given it an almost mythical status for collectors and enthusiasts. Sadly, after Shining Force 3, the series took a sharp turn away from its tactical RPG roots. Later entries in the Shining franchise leaned heavily into action RPG and dungeon crawling mechanics, leaving behind the strategic gameplay that fans of the original games adored. This shift disappointed many longtime fans who had hoped for a continuation of the tactical gameplay introduced in Shining Force 3. To this day, many fans still hope for a return to form either in the form of a remake or a new entry that embraces the tactical RPG mechanics of the classic Shining Force games. The demand is certainly there, and with the recent trend of remakes and remasters of classic games, A revival of Shining Force 3 could be a dream come true for retro RPG fans. It's the kind of game that deserves another chance in the spotlight, especially with modern gaming technology that could breathe new life into its epic multi-scenario story. Thank you for joining us. If you like this deep dive into the retro world of Shining Force 3, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep questing and keep gaming.